Tiffany, she said, with the casual tone of someone asking for the salt, do you mind if I bring up a rather sensitive subject? I looked to Ethan, who had suddenly developed great interest in refilling his water glass. Sure, I said, and instantly regretted it. I suppose you've noticed, Barbara began, steepling her fingers, that the triplets look remarkably like my side of the family, particularly Jack. She nodded toward her grandson, who at that moment was sucking carrot soup from a bread crust. It's uncanny. Even the pediatrician commented at our last visit. My skin went cold. I willed myself not to look at Ethan. But, Barbara continued, I couldn't help but notice that none, share your distinctive features, Tiffany. Not your eyes, not your coloring, not even the shape of your nose. Have you ever wondered about that? The kitchen hummed, silent and electric. I swallowed, set my glass down with a measured calm. Genetics are funny, I managed. Sometimes traits skip generations. Besides, I think Ava has my chin. Maybe, Barbara said with a surgeon's detachment. But you know these days, with all the technology, it's possible to know for certain. The words landed like dropped plates. Ethan, finally. Mom. Don't. She ignored him. I've been talking with Dr. Matthews. You remember him, darling. He's on the board at the hospital. He tells me that with just a simple test, you can rule out any doubts for everyone's peace of mind. I took the liberty of scheduling an appointment. The triplets were oblivious, licking soup off their hands, while my internal organs performed a slow, synchronized collapse. Ethan's face had gone gray. You did what? I scheduled an appointment, Barbara said, folding her napkin. Ethan, darling, with all the trouble you and Tiffany went through to have children, wouldn't it be responsible? Just to be sure? I tried to keep my hands from shaking. I focused on the smooth edge of the table, the glossy finish, the mundane task of clearing plates, but my mind was already sprinting through the permutations, the endless visits to the fertility clinic, the months of shots and hormone storms, the bleak terror that it might all be for nothing. I remembered the night of the embryo transfer, the blue paper gown, the sterile lights, Ethan's clammy hand in mine. I also remembered the nurse's warning, delivered with a too bright smile. Even with IVF, you never know. Mother Nature keeps her secrets. Mom, Ethan said, voice brittle, that's enough. I trust my wife. I trust science. Barbara gave him a look that said, sweet boy, you have always been too naive for this world. I'm not suggesting anything untoward, she said, but wouldn't it be a relief, Tiffany? To put all doubt behind us? Her eyes found mine. For a moment, I saw the outlines of the woman she once was, brilliant, driven, fiercely protective. And then I saw the fortress of insecurity, the fear of losing her only son to someone she considered beneath her. I stood. I think dinner's over, I said. Barbara dabbed her mouth, stood as well. Thank you for a lovely evening, she said, and gathered her things with the efficiency of someone used to leaving first. When the door clicked shut behind her, I stood in the hallway and breathed for the first time in 5 minutes. Ethan found me, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for mine. I'm sorry, he whispered. She always hated me, I said. It sounded pathetic in the quiet. She hates anyone she can't control. He pressed his forehead to mine. I trust you. But did I trust myself? In the months since the triplets' birth, I had come to accept the strangeness of IVF, the possibility that I might love children who looked nothing like me and yet were wholly mine. But I had never questioned Ethan, not once. The next day, we went to the lab. I made a show of bravado for the kids, dressing them in coordinated t-shirts, Mom's favorite science project, and letting them eat as many gummy bears as they wanted in the waiting room. The test itself was quick, Swabs, signatures, a sterile handshake from a nurse who had probably seen it all before. The tech assured us the results would take a few days. I lied and told her there was no rush. At home, I folded endless loads of laundry, scrubbed jelly off windows, and baked a cake from scratch. I kept moving, always moving. Ethan worked late every night, then lay awake next to me, not touching but not leaving either. On the 5th night, the call came. I had just bathed the kids and was wrangling them into pajamas when the phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mrs. Martin?" A woman's voice, too neutral. "This is she. We have the results of the paternity test. Is this a good time?" I looked at the triplets tangled together on the carpet, pink and clean and utterly themselves. "Yes," I said. There was a pause, and in it the entire universe cracked. "I'm very sorry," the woman said. "The test indicates that Mr. Martin is not the biological father of the children." I forgot how to breathe. The room grew distant, hazy, voices echoing down a tunnel. There must be a mistake," I said. "We did IVF. My husband, his sample was used. That's the only possible way. I was monitored. There's no other—" My voice broke. "I understand," the woman said, not unkindly. "Sometimes labs make errors. If you'd like to schedule a retest—" "Yes," I said, too loud. "Yes, do that. Schedule it." I hung up. For a minute, I simply stood there, hand clutching the phone so hard my knuckles went white. The kids bickered over a stuffed giraffe. Then Ava crawled into my lap and pressed her damp face into my shirt. "Mommy sad?" she asked, patting my cheek. "No," I lied. "Mommy just tired." I texted Ethan, who called back immediately. I told him the news, braced for an explosion, for anger, for the end. There was a long silence. Then, "I don't understand," he said. "How is that even possible?" "I don't know," I said. "I swear to you." "I know," he said softly. "I know, Tiff." He came home at midnight, carrying an overnight bag. He kissed the triplets while they slept, one by one. Then he sat at the edge of our bed, staring at nothing. In the morning, he was gone. The closet was half empty. The kids' room was untouched. Barbara called later that day, her voice smooth as glass. "I know this is difficult, dear, but you must see that Ethan needs space right now. For the children's sake, let's keep things civil." I hung up before I started screaming. The days that followed moved in slow motion. The world went on. Groceries, daycare, doctor's appointments. I cycled through all the stages. Denial, rage, grief. In the darkest hours, I considered the unthinkable. Had there been some night, some blackout in my memory, some slip? But no. I remembered every moment, every clinic visit, every scheduled transfer and monitored cycle. Nothing fit. And then I remembered the nurse, the smile, the warning. Mother Nature keeps her secrets. I sat at the kitchen table, the triplets napping, the silence thick. I stared at the yellow carbon copy of the clinic paperwork, the date and time of the transfer circled in blue. It had all been so clinical, so controlled. But what if— The possibility landed like a stone in my gut. What if there had been a mix-up? I dialed the clinic. The receptionist chirped a cheery greeting. I asked for Dr. Chen, the head of reproductive medicine. I used my best corporate voice, authoritative but not emotional. There was a shuffle, a transfer, a hold. When Dr. Chen came on, his voice was familiar, the cadence careful. "Mrs. Martin, what can I do for you?" "I'd like to schedule a meeting," I said. "About the triplets." "About the paternity test. There's been a mistake." He didn't speak for several seconds. Then, "I see. I'll make time for you tomorrow, 11 o'clock. I hung up, closed my eyes, and finally let myself weep. Tomorrow, I would find out which of us had lost the most. Ethan for leaving, or me for still believing that any of this had ever been in my control. There are only 2 times in my life when I felt truly invisible. Once during the hour I waited alone in a clinic for my first ever fertility consultation, and now, walking into the same building 1 year and 3 children later, certain that the only thing that could possibly matter less to the world than my crisis was me. The lobby smelled of disinfectant, and those slick, glossy pamphlets that try to tell you your failure to reproduce is just a minor setback with the right financing. I wiped my palms on my skirt and tried to recall the last time I'd felt clean. "Mrs. Martin," the receptionist chirped, blinking from behind thick lashes. "Dr. Chen will see you now." The corridor had changed since the triplets. New carpet, bland abstract art, but I still knew every step. I noticed a framed motivational print beside the consultation suite. Dream, believe, conceive. If I hadn't been dead on my feet, I might have laughed. Dr. Chen stood as I entered, offering a hand. His face looked older, and the hair above his ears had surrendered completely to gray. I remembered him as gentle, almost monk-like, but today his gaze was brisk, dissecting. "Mrs. Martin, please, have a seat." He motioned me toward a chair. There was something in the way his fingers trembled, almost imperceptibly, when he set down his file. Maybe he was nervous. Good. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, folding his hands. "I understand there's concern." "There's more than concern," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The paternity test says my husband isn't the father. I want to know what happened, and I want the truth, not a script." For a second, he looked startled, like he hadn't expected me to come out swinging. "I understand how distressing this must be," he said, "but I assure you our protocols are robust. Sample mismatches are nearly impossible. I've already begun an internal review." His word choice, nearly, tripped my radar. "What does that mean?" "Nearly?" He took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Nothing is ever 100%, but our chain of custody is airtight." "You keep saying we," I interrupted, "but who touched the samples? Who was responsible that day?" He paged through the file. "According to the chart, I performed the transfer. Our embryologist, Miss Gutierrez, prepped the specimen. A nurse, Kelly, handled intake. Can I speak with them?" He hesitated. "Kelly moved out of state last year. Ms. Gutierrez was let go after a documentation issue, but I can provide you with contact information." "How convenient," I said, unable to hide the edge. "How often do these documentation issues happen?" He bristled. "Rarely. But it can be difficult to keep good staff in this industry. The pressure is considerable." "And the consequences?" He paused. "I assure you, we take every mistake seriously. If it was our error, we'll make it right." I waited for him to offer what right meant. He didn't. I left the clinic more determined than before. I called Ethan from the parking lot. He didn't pick up. I tried again, left a voicemail. Then I called Charlotte Williams. She answered on the second ring. Her voice taut. "Tiff, I saw your texts. What's happening?" "Charlotte," I said, feeling the waves start again, "they're stonewalling me. Dr. Chen is covering his ass. The clinic is blaming phantom employees and difficult industry conditions. I want to go nuclear. I need options." Charlotte's voice shifted from friend to legal counsel. Sharp, ready. "Okay, first, stop talking to them alone. Second, document everything, every call, every conversation. Third, I know a PI whose ex-cop specializes in medical fraud. You want his number?" I blinked away tears. "Yes." "I'll text it." "And Tiff?" "Yeah? This is not your fault, you hear me?" I nodded, knowing she couldn't see. "Thanks, Char." The PI's name was David Harper, and he answered his phone with a clipped Harper. The background noise was all shuffling paper and clacking keyboards. I summarized the situation. He listened, asked questions in bursts. Chain of custody? Previous complaints? Surveillance on site? Anything off about Dr. Chen's finances? I hesitated. He drives a Tesla, but I always assumed that was normal for the industry. He grunted. You'd be surprised how many doctors can't afford Teslas. I'll look into it. Give me names, dates, everything you remember. I'll run them. I gave him my info, hung up, and immediately started a list. Every nurse, every date, every small weirdness from those months at the clinic. The tremor in Dr. Chen's hand. The time Barbara showed up unannounced during a blood draw, insisting on paying our bill in person. The way Ms. Gutierrez's hands shook the day of the transfer, her voice flat when she wished us good luck. The post-procedure bouquets from Barbara, arriving like clockwork, always with cards that read, "Welcome to the family, little miracle." The more I wrote, the more I noticed the pattern. Barbara was everywhere, involved in every step, never missing an appointment even when Ethan couldn't attend. Sometimes she insisted on driving me, explaining that Tiffany shouldn't be alone in these critical moments. I thought she was controlling. Now I wondered if she was just making sure. 3 days later, Harper called back. "You have time to talk?" I parked the van outside Target and put him on speaker. Go. The clinic has 2 open lawsuits, quiet settlements mostly, not your doctor, but similar incidents. Both times, records showed last-minute changes in sample labeling. Both times, staff turnover happened right after the patients complained. My heart banged against my ribs. What about Dr. Chen? His record is clean on paper, but a financial check shows large cash deposits in the weeks before and after your embryo transfer. Not enough to buy a Tesla, but enough to raise eyebrows. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Could Barbara have bribed him? Possible. She's got the means and the attitude. Does she have an account at Fidelity National? Yes, I said, shivering. Then she's the one who wired the cash. I checked property records. She co-signed for the Clinic Improvement Fund after your treatment. I closed my eyes. She did this. She paid him to switch the sample. Looks that way. You want to confront him first or go straight to legal? Let me talk to him. Then I'll call my lawyer. I parked the van outside the clinic, watched the windows for a few minutes. When I finally went inside, I saw Dr. Chen in his office, hands folded as if in prayer. He looked up when I entered, and the mask slipped. Just a flicker, but enough. "You know why I'm here," I said before he could speak. He deflated. "I do." "Why?" My voice broke, and I hated that. He looked past me toward a landscape print on the wall. Because she threatened to destroy my career. She called the board. She threatened to sue for negligence, for malpractice. She said you'd suffered enough, that it would be easier if the right sample was used. You mean her sons? He nodded, slow and heavy. I told myself I was helping, but I should have said no. "I am sorry, Mrs. Martin, more than you know." I shook my head. "That's not true." "You're sorry you got caught." He didn't argue. "Will you sign a statement?" I asked. He looked at his hands. "If I do, I lose my license." "My livelihood." "You already lost your integrity," I said. "Do one thing right." He nodded. "I'll cooperate." "I'll talk to your attorney." I left, stomach curdled with a sour taste of justice. I dialed Charlotte as I walked to the car. "He confessed," I said. "He'll sign a statement." Charlotte sounded both triumphant and exhausted. "Good. Let's prepare the suit. Do you want to confront Barbara first, or serve her papers cold?" I thought about it, imagined her at the club, sipping tea, so sure of herself. I want her to know she lost. Charlotte whistled. "My office tomorrow? 10 a.m.? I'll be there." I spent the evening with the triplets. I let them eat cereal for dinner and watch cartoons for an hour past bedtime. I watched their small faces as they drifted off, features now shifting in my eyes, not as a reminder of what had been stolen, but as proof that no one could ever take them from me. The next morning, I dressed in my best pre-motherhood suit and met Charlotte at her office. The conference room was all glass and chrome, as if designed to reflect every possible angle of humiliation. Barbara sat at the far end, immaculate as always, a wisp of smugness in her smile. She barely acknowledged me. "Tiffany, I see you're well." Charlotte's gaze could have sand-blasted steel. "We're here because you committed criminal interference in a medical process. My client has sworn statements and financial records, not to mention the confession of Dr. Chen himself. Do you have any comment?" Barbara looked bored, then irritated. "I did what was necessary for my family. My son deserved children of his own blood. Tiffany could never provide that. I corrected a wrong." "You destroyed our family," I said, voice so flat it didn't sound like mine. Barbara's mouth twitched. "You never belonged. You still don't." Charlotte slid the paperwork across the table. "You'll sign a settlement, and you'll stay out of their lives. If you contest, we'll go public." Barbara stared at the page, as if the print might rearrange itself into a pardon. "What about Ethan?" she asked. Charlotte smiled, predatory. "He's aware of everything. He'll be joining us shortly." The door opened and Ethan entered, looking thinner, older, but more himself than I'd seen in months. He didn't look at his mother. "I'm here for my children," he said, voice low and clear, "and for my wife. You're dead to us." Barbara looked from him to me, something in her expression fracturing. "You'd choose her over me?" she said, as if the question were unthinkable. Ethan reached for my hand. "Every time." There was silence. Then, with a practiced flick, Barbara signed the paper. We left the office together. The sun was high, the air bright, the world outside as unremarkable as always. For the first time in a year, I felt something like peace. The work wasn't done. There were lawsuits to file, apologies to make, children to comfort. But as we walked to the car, Ethan slipped his hand into mine, and I realized I hadn't lost anything that mattered. I'd only begun to get it back. Lawsuits are like pregnancies. At first you think they're going to change everything, then you find out it's just the beginning of a long, uncomfortable ordeal you can't speed up or escape. Charlotte was in her element, gleaming with predatory satisfaction as she drafted the first salvo against Barbara and the clinic. Her war room, usually a tidy corner office with fresh-cut flowers and a single orderly stack of briefs, now overflowed with binders, spreadsheets, and digital evidence arranged in color-coded layers of escalating doom. "I want to hit the clinic and your mother-in-law at the same time," Charlotte explained, circling items on her legal pad in aggressive red ink. A pincer movement. She's cocky, but she'll fold when she realizes the clinic is ready to flip on her to save their own asses. I barely heard her. The room felt too bright, the windows magnifying the February sun until it was all I could do not to squint. "Are you okay?" she asked, softer. "You look like I'm about to be sick," I finished for her. "But don't worry, I can take it." Charlotte set her pen down. "Tiffany, you can take it, but you don't have to. Let me carry as much of this as I can, all right?" I nodded, fighting the urge to reach across the table and hold her hand. Instead, I straightened my spine and took notes, because I knew what was coming next. Depositions, interviews, mediation, every humiliation and private agony transcribed and notarized. By the time I got home, the kids were already in pajamas. Ethan had let them eat macaroni and cheese with their hands, and now the dining room looked like a Jackson Pollock original in shades of orange. I watched them for a moment, each absorbed in the process of squishing noodles between their fingers, and tried to recall what normal ever looked like. Ethan noticed me in the doorway, wiped his palms on a dish towel. "Hey, how'd it go?" I shrugged. "Charlotte wants a joint lawsuit. She thinks we can get criminal charges if Chen doesn't recant." Ethan nodded, silent. He looked better than he had last week. He'd shaved, at least, and stopped sleeping on the guest bed, but the lines at the corners of his eyes seemed deeper, the way they get when someone has realized nothing will ever be the same again. He let out a breath. "I'll back you, whatever it takes." "Thanks." I stood there, wanting to say more, but unable to bridge the gap. We weren't fighting anymore, but we were still moving in orbits too wide to touch. I loaded the dishwasher while he scrubbed the high chair. At one point, our hands brushed, and we both flinched, then laughed at the same time. It felt good and awful. That night, after the triplets were down, I curled on the sofa and opened my laptop to review the day's paperwork. Ethan hovered in the hallway before coming to sit beside me, closer than he'd dared in weeks. He looked at the screen, then at me. "Do you hate me?" he asked, voice low. I shook my head. "No. I'm just tired. I want to move forward. I want this to matter, somehow." "It does matter," he said and reached for my hand. His thumb traced the scar on my knuckle, the one I'd gotten slicing cantaloupe the first week of quarantine. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for us." I squeezed his fingers. "We can fight now. Together." We stayed there until sleepiness pulled at my eyelids, and for the first time in months, I didn't dread tomorrow. Over the next few weeks, my life became a series of interviews. Harper's contacts turned up 3 other families who'd conceived at the clinic within months of me, each with their own medical oddities and paperwork errors. 2 of them agreed to testify. Dr. Chen, now facing loss of licensure and possible jail time, provided a full affidavit. He painted a picture of a woman, my mother-in-law, so obsessed with legacy that she would bribe, threaten, and manipulate to ensure her bloodline survived. He'd rationalized it at first, until the guilt became cancerous. Media got wind of the suit. At first, it was a blip, local TV, a sidebar in the city paper. But when a national podcast latched onto it, headlined "Betrayal in the Test Tube," everything exploded. For a week, I fielded calls from strangers, some offering support, others venom. But the only attention I cared about was at home. The triplets were the barometer. At first, they acted out. Tantrums, food strikes, all of them reverting to baby talk overnight. I responded by holding them more, reading them the same 4 books on loop, promising and meaning it that Mommy and Daddy would always love them and always be here. Eventually, things calmed. Ava started sleeping through the night again. Jack stopped biting his sisters. Lily resumed her campaign for world domination with new vigor. Ethan and I began to heal in fits and starts. Some nights we talked for hours. Others we sat together in companionable silence, watching reruns or planning meals or just staring at the blinking lights on the baby monitor. There were moments of relapse when I'd catch him staring at the kids with a look that was equal parts wonder and regret, but they became less frequent as the days stretched on. Barbara, for her part, did not go quietly. She hired a lawyer, then another. When Charlotte served her the lawsuit, Barbara called me twice, each time leaving a voicemail that started polite and ended in hissing, barely coded threats. I played them for Charlotte, who smiled and added them to our file. Then, one rainy Tuesday, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Tiffany," said the voice on the other end, brittle and tired. "It's Barbara." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you want?" She inhaled, the sound almost a sob. "I want to see my grandchildren. Please." Her words landed like hail. I waited for the rest. Some veiled warning, a demand, but all that came next was silence. "We can talk," I said, measured, "but it won't change the lawsuit." "I know," she said so softly I barely heard. "Just, please." I called Charlotte. She advised me to document everything, keep the meeting in a public place, and bring Ethan if possible. We agreed on Saturday morning at the playground near the triplets' preschool. The day of the meeting, Barbara arrived in muted gray, hair less helmet, more wispy. She looked older, diminished. She barely greeted me before dropping to her knees in the wood chips, letting the triplets swarm her. They showed her their favorite monkey bars, the worm Lily had found, the bandage on Jack's knee. Barbara hugged them all, even Ava, who'd never let anyone hug her on first try. She looked at me, tears streaking her mascara. "Thank you," she mouthed. Ethan came halfway through the visit. He didn't speak to his mother, not at first, but watched her with the kids. After a while, he sat next to her on the bench, not close, but not hostile. "Mom," he said quietly, "if you ever do anything to hurt my family again, you'll never see us, or them." Barbara nodded. "I understand." She didn't look up. After that, we met her once a month, supervised, always in a public place. She never spoke of the lawsuit, never tried to undermine me again. At home, Ethan and I debated whether forgiveness was possible. We settled on boundaries, strict, bright-lined, and non-negotiable. The case against the clinic was slower but more satisfying. They agreed to a hefty settlement and were forced to implement new safety measures and staff oversight. I accepted their apology, not because it was enough, but because I'd stopped needing it to be. Months later, after the checks cleared and the news cycle forgot about us, I walked the triplets to school alone. Jack ran ahead, chasing a squirrel. Lily skipped beside me, narrating the weather with the authority of a junior meteorologist. Ava clung to my hand, swinging it like she was conducting music. I felt the weight in my chest lighten, replaced by something like pride. I'd survived. My family had survived. Maybe I would never be whole in the way I'd once imagined, but I was real, scarred, but genuine, and no one could take that from me. That night, after the kids were asleep, Ethan pulled me into our bed, wrapped himself around me, and whispered, "You saved us." I believed him finally, and as we drifted off, I dreamed not of DNA or bloodlines or old betrayals, but of Saturday mornings, wood chips, laughter, and a future that, for the first time in years, felt like it belonged to us. When Ethan told me to dress up and be ready by 6, I almost laughed. In our marriage, dressing up had come to mean swapping yoga pants for leggings that didn't have visible food stains. I nearly protested. There was a pile of laundry to fold, Ava was threatening a fever, and the forecast called for showers. But his insistence was so gentle, so determined, that I decided to play along. At 5:45, I found a dress I hadn't worn in years. A simple ivory thing with capped sleeves, forgiving at the waist. The zipper stuck, and for a second, I panicked that nothing would fit, that I'd embarrass myself in front of whoever Ethan had invited over for this low-key evening. But then, Lily wandered in, took one look at me, and said, "Mommy, you look like the Tooth Fairy." And suddenly, I didn't care if the dress clung in strange places. I was a goddamn Tooth Fairy. The backyard, as I stepped out, was transformed. White folding chairs lined the stone path, all facing a wooden arch draped with wildflowers and strung with fairy lights. The neighbor's ancient maple shaded the yard, and the branches caught the dusk in bursts of soft gold. A handful of friends stood in small clusters, glasses of sparkling cider in hand, voices gentle so as not to break the spell. At the end of the aisle stood Ethan in a dress shirt and slacks, no tie, sleeves rolled. Next to him, the triplets, each in matching pastel shirts and tiny suspenders, fidgeting with bouquets made of clover and dandelions. I felt the threat of tears before I realized what this was. Ethan smiled, wide and nervous, and motioned for me to come down the aisle. The triplets darted ahead, then circled back to take my hands, one clinging to each of my wrists, and Jack, ever the outlier, doing somersaults in the grass until Ethan scooped him up. I barely noticed the music, only the hush of people who mattered and the way the world faded until the only thing left was the arch and the lights and Ethan. When I reached him, he took my hands. His grip was warm, dry, solid. "I know we never did this properly," he said, voice a little rough. "And after everything we survived, I needed to do it now. With everyone we love, and most importantly, with you." He nodded to Charlotte, who stood as our impromptu officiant, grinning fiercely. She read something short and beautiful about fresh starts and old scars, then motioned for us to say our vows. I went first because I couldn't bear to wait. "I promise to trust in us even when it's hard," I said, my words shaking, "to let you in even when I'm scared, to love you with my whole imperfect heart, to keep our children safe and to teach them that happiness isn't always pretty, but it's real and it's worth fighting for." Ethan's eyes shone. "I promise to listen, really listen. To stand with you when you're strong and hold you when you're not. To protect you and our kids with everything I have. To make you laugh every day, or at least try, and to never ever let you doubt that you are my home." Charlotte pronounced us, and the backyard erupted in applause. Jack hurled his bouquet skyward. Lily and Ava tackled my knees. Ethan kissed me, slow and careful, like he wanted the moment to last forever. We celebrated with lemonade and cupcakes. I watched the triplets dash barefoot through the grass, wild with sugar, their joy so loud it drowned out every fear I'd ever harbored. At dusk, fairy lights flickered on and Ethan pulled me close for a dance. Awkward, full of missteps, perfect. When the last guest left and the chairs were folded and the light still glimmered on the arch, we sat on the porch steps and watched our children catch fireflies. I rested my head on Ethan's shoulder, breathing in the scent of damp earth and vanilla frosting. "You did all this," I whispered. He kissed my hair. "We did all this." The next morning, we loaded the kids and a battered duffel into the SUV and drove north, toward the lake cabin we hadn't visited since the triplets were infants. The sky was wide and blue, the air sharp with spring. For 2 hours, the kids sang made-up songs and argued over window views. For once, I didn't check my phone, didn't think about lawsuits or emails or Barbara's shadow lurking at the edge of everything. At the cabin, we unpacked quickly, Ethan and I making up the beds, the kids already stripping down to diapers and shrieking with delight at the freedom. We spent the day on the pebbled beach, skipping stones and collecting driftwood. Jack fell in almost immediately, then splashed back to shore, shivering but delighted. Lily built a kingdom of sand, crowned herself queen, and drafted her siblings as loyal subjects. Ava sat in my lap, quiet and observant, head resting on my chest as she traced shapes in the sand with her toes. Later, we paddled a battered green canoe out onto the water. The triplets took turns fighting over the little plastic paddles, then lost interest and watched for turtles. I let Ethan steer. I just closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. We drifted, and for the first time in years, I was content to be carried. That night, after dinner, we roasted marshmallows over a fire pit, the children's sticky fingers and faces illuminated by the flames. Ethan played old songs on his phone, and we taught the kids how to sing along. Afterward, we lay on a woven blanket beneath the pines, the triplets nestled between us. Lily and Jack fell asleep first, arms and legs sprawled over mine and Ethan's stomachs. Ava curled against my side, her breath slow and even. I listened to their breathing, the hush of the lake, the wind in the trees. Ethan squeezed my hand, and I felt the slow, healing thump of his heart. "We could stay here forever," I said, half dreaming. He laughed, quiet. "Let's never leave." Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. But for the first time, forever felt possible. The fire burned low, the night grew cool. We pulled the blanket over us, drew the children close, and watched the stars appear. One, then two, then a sky full of promise. I knew the world would come for us again with its court dates and reminders and old hurts. But in that moment, I decided I didn't have to be perfect. It was enough to be together, flawed and hopeful, building something new from the pieces of before. I kissed each child's forehead, one by one. Then I kissed Ethan, long and sweet and real. And under the vast, unblinking sky, I let myself believe that we were whole. There are things nobody tells you about surviving a crisis, how the aftermath lingers, how little problems start to feel like privileges, how planning a grocery list can be as comforting as therapy. It was a Tuesday morning, and Ethan and I sat at the kitchen island, mugs of reheated coffee between us, spreadsheets and glossy brochures splayed like a crime scene across the butcher block. "So," Ethan said, "if we pick the open adoption agency, that's a $5,000 up front, plus legal. We could do that, but we'd need to pause swim lessons for a bit. Unless you want to switch to the foster to adopt route." He was only half joking, but I appreciated that he'd already color-coded the options. I glanced at the list, pretending I knew what transracial adoption incentives meant, then circled the phone number for the agency with the best reviews. "Let's call this one," I said, nudging the sheet his way. "And also, let's not tell the triplets until we're past the home study. They'll start asking where the baby is every time a delivery truck goes by." He grinned, pencil tapping a nervous rhythm. "Agreed." I think I still have the social worker's card somewhere. We sat in silence for a bit, the easy kind. Then Ethan said, "Are we good with Mom's boundary document?" I reached for the envelope at the end of the island, thick with legalese, and scanned the print. "Visits by invitation only. All contact to be scheduled in advance. No disparaging comments about parenting choices. And she's not to bring up the lawsuit ever again. Did we miss anything?" Ethan shook his head. "Just add no unannounced appearances and we're set." He signed the bottom, then slid it to me. I signed too and sealed the envelope. That was that. Not the end of the story, but the start of a new one. A week later, we hosted the triplets' 4th birthday in the backyard. The morning dawned clear, and the grass was so green it looked artificial. I'd gone overboard again with the decorations. Pastel balloons in floating bouquets, a rented bounce house, and a cake shaped like a stack of primary-colored building blocks. Jack made it his mission to pop every balloon before the guests arrived, while Lily and Ava herded their friends around the yard in pursuit of imaginary treasure. People came, neighbors, classmates, a few of my old project management buddies, and even Charlotte, who brought a gift wrapped in highlighter yellow paper and a bottle of real champagne for me and Ethan. By noon, the house was filled with shrieking children and adults, laughing just a little too loudly, happy to be anywhere but their own homes. At the party's edge stood Barbara. She'd arrived on time, hands full of presents, dressed down in a navy cardigan and practical shoes. She didn't cross the invisible line I'd drawn, never more than 20 feet from the patio, never alone with the kids, always asking before doing anything. She hovered by the drink table, smiling at the triplets from a distance. After cake, 3 layers, each with a different filling, and presents, mostly loud, battery-powered plastic, we corralled the triplets onto the patio for the candle lighting. Ethan knelt beside them, arms around their shoulders, while I lit the 4 stubby candles perched atop the cake's frosting. The kids chanted the birthday song off-key, then fought over who would blow first. In the end, they did it together. Cheeks puffed, grins wide, frosting already streaked across their faces. I caught Ethan's eye. He mouthed, "We did it," and I believed him. Barbara lingered near the edge as people filtered out, waiting for a moment when the crowd thinned. She cleared her throat, then approached, hands folded. "Thank you for letting me be here. she said, voice pitched just above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve it." I held her gaze, searching for an old threat or angle, but found only humility. "Everyone deserves a second chance," I said, "but the rules are the rules." She nodded and for once did not argue. Instead, she crouched to hug each grandchild in turn. Ava hugged back fiercely. Jack patted her hair and said, "You smell like soap." Lily just smiled, a little wary but polite. When Barbara left, I felt the pressure in my chest lessen, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. As dusk settled, Ethan and I sat on the back steps, triplets sprawled on our laps, sticky with frosting and dirt. The yard was littered with party hats and half-deflated balloons. The fireflies flickered around the garden beds, blinking their Morse code. I leaned against Ethan and watched the kids chase each other through the twilight, unburdened and wild. Maybe our family had been forged from broken pieces, but what we'd built together was unbreakable. And for the first time in forever, I was sure that was enough. For more inspiring life stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Countless untold stories are waiting for you here. With heartfelt thanks. Until next time, I'm Tiffany from Smooth Revenge.